Okay, we'll begin ourselves tonight with a roll call for Plan Commission members. Dominic Browse, Tara Briscoe,
Present.
Jed Cole, Benji Gomez,
Present.
Pete Gretzinger,
Present.
Ray Jefferson, Kim Kazanis,
Here.
Jason Ramos, Chase Smith,
Here.
Jeremy Vickers, and Enid Wade, and Jed Cole.
Present.
We will now call the meeting of the Waco Plan Commission on March 23rd, 2021 to order at 7:03 p.m. On March 16th, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meetings Act pursuant to his state of disaster authority. The change was effective March 16th, 2020 until further notice or until the state disaster declaration expires. In accordance with social distancing guidelines and while providing as much transparency as possible, the Waco Plan Commission meetings will be closed to the public attending in person. This meeting is being broadcast live at www.wccc.tv. The audio is being recorded and the recording will be made available to the public. According to the Attorney General, governmental bodies must offer members of the public alternative methods of communication with their public officials. In an effort to allow for as much public input as possible, those who wish to speak by phone on public hearings were required to register with planning staff by 12 p.m. on March 23rd, 2021. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of our February 23rd work session and business meeting. Are there any changes or additions? Seeing none, they stand approved as written. We'll now move on to our public hearing agenda items. Mr. Peters, will you present the subdivisions before us today?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is a public hearing on the final plat and construction plans of Southern Heights Edition. Staff has reviewed the plats and construction plans and recommends approval of the plat and construction plans.
Thank you. Are there any questions for city staff? We don't have any registered speakers, so we'll open and close the public hearing. Do we have a motion on the final plat and construction plans of Southern Heights Edition?
So moved.
Second.
Is that a motion for approval?
Oh, of course.
Excellent. We have a motion.
I'll get this right before my second term is over.
We have a motion by Mr. Gretzinger and a second by Ms. Briscoe. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, if you would like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. All right, that is unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Peters, I think we have one more subdivision to take a look at.
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing on the final plat of construction plans of the Bodie Road Edition, Phase 1. Again, we have reviewed, staff has reviewed this plat and construction plans and recommends approval with conditions on this one.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for city staff? We have no registered speakers, so we'll open and close the public hearing. Do we have a motion on this item?
So moved for approval.
Second. Just to clarify, staff recommendation was approval with conditions. Is that the motion, or are we straight approval?
Well, okay.
I just wanted to dot the i's.
So moved for approval with conditions.
All righty.
That's
okay,
it.
we have a motion
tonight.
by Mr. Gretzinger and a second by Mr. Cole, was it? If you'd like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. Thank you. All right, motion passes unanimously. We will now take up our zoning applications. I'm not sure if it's me or Mr. Peters will be taking that up, but
Yeah, B's gonna start out.
I'll start with the special permit request.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing or request from Nathan Landers for property at 2901 Parrott Avenue for a special permit to allow short-term rental type 1 in an R1B district. And we mailed out 22 notices and had 1 returned in favor of the request. Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to special provisions and conditions and based on the following findings. 1, that the proposed use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. 2, that the proposed use is compatible with the appropriate and orderly development of the area in which it is located. 3, that the proposed use would not be more objectionable to neighboring properties because of traffic congestion, noise, fumes, vibrations, or any other characteristics in any use permitted in the zoning district without the grant of a special exception. And 4, that available community facilities and services, including the road system providing access to the proposed use, are adequate for the proposed use. And these findings are required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
Thank you. We'll now open the public hearing. I believe we have 1 registered speaker on this item.
Hi, Mr. Landers, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Landers. If you could just state your address and then any comments you have for the commission.
My address is 2901 Pear Avenue. And what was the other question? I'm sorry.
Oh, just any comments or statements you have for the commission.
I just want to make sure that I'm doing everything right here and don't want to waste anybody's time and just want to follow the rules. So for the zoning. So
Perfect. Awesome. Are there any questions for Mr. Landers? All right. Well, thank you for coming on here, and yeah, appreciate you making yourself available.
yes, thank you very much for everything.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated.
Do we have any additional questions for city staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
I move for approval with conditions based on staff recommendation.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Cole. Any discussion? Hearing none, if you'd like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. Passes unanimously. Ms. Wharton, could you give us Z-21-10?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, this is a public hearing on a request from Jeff Bird on behalf of JS Properties LLC, Series 4613 Cole Avenue, for property at 4613 Cole Avenue for a special permit for short-term rental type 2 in an R1B district. And we mailed out 32 notices for this request and had 0 returned. Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to special provisions and conditions and based on the findings required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance that were previously read on record.
We'll now open the public hearing. We have no registered speakers on this item. Do we have any additional questions for city staff? So we'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from city staff on this issue. Do we have any motions?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve based on staff findings and conditions.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Briscoe and a second by Mr. Smith. Is there any discussion? If you would like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. All right. Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Warden, would you take us on to our next item?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing on a request from Alexander Beasley on behalf of Beasley Construction LLC for property at 2912 Mildred Street for a special permit to allow short-term rental type 2 in an R1B district. We mailed out 20 notices for this item and had 0 returned. Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to the special provisions and conditions and based on the findings required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
Thank you. We will now open our public hearing. Again, we have no public speakers scheduled on this item. Are there any additional questions for city staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. As you heard, we have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
Move for approval with conditions based on staff recommendations.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Smith and a second, I believe, by Mr. Cole. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, if you would like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. Okay, just to be clear, I think we have a motion to approve by myself, Ms. Briscoe, Mr. Smith, Mr. Gretzinger, Ms. Jefferson, Ms. Kazanis, and Mr. Cole. So motion passes. That would be 6-1. My math is correct. 7-1, 6-1, 7-1. And we'll move on.
I'm sorry, we missed. Who was opposed?
I believe Mr. Gomez is. All right, sometimes I have to make sure I actually see the hand with the filters in the back.
Good point. Okay, if y'all are ready for the next item, I can move on to that one.
All right, yes, let's take a 21-12.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a request from Braden and Lucy Appel for property at 2329 Columbia Street for a special permit to allow short-term rental type 2 in an R1B district. We mailed out 27 notices and had 2 returned, 1 with no comment and 1 just acknowledgement that the notice was received. Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to the special provisions and conditions and based on the findings required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
Thank you. We'll now open the public hearing. We have 0 public speakers scheduled for this item. Are there any additional questions for city staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
Move for approval with conditions based on staff recommendation.
Okay.
We have a motion for approval by Mr. Smith and a second by either Ms. Briscoe or Mr. Cole. I'm not sure who got it there first. Is there any additional discussion? All right. If you would like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. If you oppose the motion, please raise your hand. All right. We have 7 votes in favor with Mr. Gomez voting in opposition. And Ms. Warden, would you move us on to Z-21-13?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is a request from Lisa Kim Price on behalf of FWC Hands Across Waco, Inc. for property at 1620 Baylor Avenue for a special permit to allow short-term rental type 3 in an R3E district. We mailed out 18 notices and had 0 return for this item. Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to the special provisions and conditions and based on the findings required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. We have 0 public speakers scheduled for this item. Do we have any additional questions for city staff? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. We have a recommendation for approval. Do we have any motions on this item?
Move for approval with conditions based on staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion for approval by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Cole. Is there any additional discussion? All right. If you would like to vote in favor of this item, please raise your hand. All right. We have unanimous votes in favor of that motion. All right. Ms. Warden, would you take us on to Z-21-22?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, this is a public hearing on a request from Christopher and Rebecca Kosho for property at 1309 Holly Vista Street for a special permit to allow short-term rental type 2 in an R1B district. For this request, we mailed out 24 notices and had 0 returned. Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to the special provisions and conditions and based on the findings required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. We have 2 public speakers registered on this item.
You gotta go to attendees.
Oh, I'm sorry. Give me just a moment.
There's
I'm not
Kasha.
finding. Okay, we'll let.
Hello, this is Chris. Can you hear me?
Hi, Chris. Thank you for joining us. If you could just state your full name and your address.
Sure. My full name is Christopher Kosho, and the address is 1309 Holly Vista.
Thank you. Please feel free to address the commission with any statements you have.
Just wanted to say thank you for your consideration to the Plan Commission. I just want to also make sure that I'm following the process correctly. This is our first time going through this, so I'm available for any questions and just grateful for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Kosho? Well, it's easy. Thank you for making yourself available for us.
Thank you.
We have one more, Mr. Carvalho.
I'm not seeing him on here. Mr. Carvalho, if you are on the line, if you would raise your hand. I don't see your name on our list currently. There are a couple of phone numbers that don't have a name tied to them. So if you are one of those numbers, please raise your hand.
And just to be clear, he's listed as the property manager, so I assume he's speaking in favor of the item.
That's our assumption as well, but I don't see him listed on here.
Okay. Well, we will, I think, go ahead and move on from there, unless there's any other avenue to get him onto the call at this moment. So.
I'd check with Kasho if he knows. Mr. Kasho, to see if he knows.
Oh, Mr. Kosho is raising his hand. Just a moment. Hi, Mr. Kosho.
Hi. Yes, I've texted him, and he hasn't texted back yet, so I'm not sure if he had something come up for him. But my wife and I do live outside of McLennan County. Mr. Carvalho is a friend of ours, and he will be the designated operator, and he does live within the county.
Great.
So I would also assume that he would vote in favor of it.
Sounds great. Thanks much.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any additional questions for city staff on this item? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. We do have a recommendation of approval for city staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
Move for approval based on staff recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion for approval by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Cole, carrying the team on their backs today. Do we have any additional discussion on this item? Excellent. Hearing none. If you would like to vote in favor of the item, please raise your hand. Okay. If you would like to vote in opposition to this item, please raise your hand. Okay. We have a vote of 7 in favor, 1 opposed, with Mr. Gomez as the opposition. Ms. Wharton, would you take us to case Z-21-24?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a request from Carmen and Rodney Roller for property at 2901 Homan Avenue for a special permit to allow short-term rental type 1 in an R1B district. We mailed out 24 notices and had 0 returned. We did receive 1 email in support of the request. Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to the special provisions and conditions and based on the findings required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. We have 0 public speakers scheduled on this item. Do we have any additional questions for city staff? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
I'd like to make a motion to approve based on staff findings and conditions.
Second.
Awesome. We have a motion by Ms. Briscoe to approve and a second by Mr. Gretzinger. Do we have any additional discussion? All right. Hearing none, if you would like to vote in favor of this item, please raise your hand. If you would like to vote in opposition to this motion, please raise your hand. All right. I think we have a vote of 7 in favor on this item, 1 opposed, being myself. And Mr. Peters, will you be taking the zoning items?
Yes. So this is a public hearing on a request from Loretta and Ronald Harris, Jessica Lopez, and Yvonne and Ernest Webster on property located at 2012, 2014, 2020 North 5th Street to rezone from R2 to 03. We did mail out 24 notices and had 0 returned. But we did receive a response back from the Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association in opposition, and their main concern was the zone change would allow short-term rentals on those properties. Planning Services does recommend approval of the request to change the zoning from R2 to 03 based on the following findings. 1, the proposed zoning is keeping with the land use component of the comprehensive plan and the Imagine Waco plan for greater downtown. 2, the public infrastructure is adequate to provide for uses allowed in 03 zoning district. 3, the property meets all the area and width requirements for 03 zoning. And 4, there's 03 zoning near the subject property.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. We do not have any public speakers scheduled on this item. Are there any questions for city staff? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
Move for approval with conditions based on staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Ms. Briscoe. Do we have any discussion on this item? All right. If you'd like to vote in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. If you would like to vote in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. We have a vote of 7 in favor, 1 opposed. Mr. Gomez. All right, Mr. Peters, would you take us to Z-21-115?
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing on request from Mark Boozer at property located at 1301 Daughtry Avenue to rezone from R2 to R3C. We mailed out 20 notices on this one and had one returned in support of the request. Planning Services recommends approval of the zone change based on the following findings. The proposed zoning is compatible to land use component of the comprehensive plan and the purpose and intent of the college and university neighborhoods district overlay. The existing infrastructure and street conditions are adequate to support the densities allowed in R3C zoning. Once platted, the property meets all the area and width requirements for R3C zoning, and there is R3C zoning near the subject property.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. We have no public speakers registered for this item. Are there any additional questions for staff? We'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval, as you heard. Do we have any motions on this item?
Motion to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Cole and a second by Mr. Smith. Do we have any discussion by the commission? All right. If you'd like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. All right. Passes unanimously. All right, Mr. Peters, in the case of Z-21-17, what's the recommendation of city staff?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing on a request from Michael Beavers on behalf of Fikes Wholesale Inc. at the property located at 6251 Bagby Avenue to rezone from M2 to C2. We mailed out 10 notices on this one and had 0 return. Planning Services recommends approval of the zone change based on the following findings. One, the proposed zoning is keeping with the land use component of the comprehensive plan. 2, the public infrastructure is adequate to provide for uses allowed in C2 zoning. 3, the property meets all the area and width requirements for C2 zoning. And 4, the property is near the intersection of 2 arterial streets, those being the Texas Central Parkway and Bagby Avenue.
Thank you. We will now open our public hearing. We do have one public speaker registered on this item.
Yes, thank you, council. My name is Guy Slimp. I live at 2209 Highland Drive, Salado, Texas, 76501. Just wanted to make myself available and let you know it's also tied to an annexation later on in y'all's agenda tonight. But if you have any questions, I'm available.
Thank you, Mr. Slimp. Do we have any questions for Mr. Slimp? All right. Well, thank you, sir, for making yourself available. If anything comes up on the annexation, we will obviously talk to you at that point. So,
thank you.
Do we have any additional questions for city staff? All right. Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this issue?
Move for approval with conditions based on staff recommendation.
We have a motion for approval by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Chase, or excuse me, by Mr. Cole. Keep doing that. Do we have any discussion on the item? All right. If you'd like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. All right. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Peters, do you want to present Z-21-19? I know it's been requested to be withdrawn from the agenda.
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing on a request from Adam Whitfield on behalf of Federico M. Oliver, Honorio M. Alvera, and Annabelle Andreas Gonzalez Jr. at property located 11801 China Spring Road for land use designation change from urban residential to mixed use flex and a zone change from R1B to C2. We did receive a request to withdraw this application by the applicants, and staff does recommend approval of the withdrawal.
Thank you. So no registered public speakers. Any questions for staff on the request for withdrawal? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of a motion to withdraw from city staff. Do we have any motions on the item?
I move that we approve the motion to withdraw based on staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion to withdraw the item by Mr. Smith and a second by Ms. Briscoe. Do we have any discussion? If you'd like to vote in favor of the item, please raise your hand. All right. Motion passes unanimously. In the case of Z-21-20, what's the recommendation of city staff?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing on request from Jacob Bell on behalf of Swanson Findlay Limited and the city of Waco, a property located at 10108 and 10200 China Spring Road, to rezone from O3 to C2. We mailed out 16 notices on this one and had none returned. Planning Services recommends approval of the zone change based on the following findings. One, the proposed zoning is keeping with the land use component of the comprehensive plan. Two, the public infrastructure is adequate to provide for uses allowed in C2 zoning district. Three, the property meets all area width requirements for C2 zoning. Four, there's C2 zoning adjacent to the subject property. And then five, C2 zoning is the dominant zoning between Cougar Ridge and Saddle Creek Road along China Spring Highway.
Thank you. We'll now open the public hearing on this agenda item. We have 0 public speakers scheduled. Are there any additional questions for staff at this time? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval. Do we have any motions on this item?
Move for approval based on staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Smith and a second by Ms. Briscoe. If you'd like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Mr. Peters, in the case of Z-21-21, what's the recommendation of city staff?
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing on request from Michael Ash on the behalf of AE Properties and City of Waco for property located at 1014 and 1016 Ross Avenue, 800, 804, 812, 816, and 826 South 11th Street, and 1013, 1017, and 1019 Cleveland Avenue to rezone from C3 to O2. We mailed out 20 notices on this one and no comments received back. Planning Services recommends approval of the zone change request based on the following findings. That the proposed zoning is keeping with the land use component of the comprehensive plan and the Imagine Waco plan for greater downtown. That the public infrastructure is adequate to provide for uses allowed in O2 zoning district. That the property meets all area and width requirements for O2 zoning, and that there is O2 zoning adjacent and near the subject property.
Thank you. We'll now open the public hearing. We have 4 public speakers scheduled to speak on this item. Mr. Is it Crete?
Yes. I'm not sure who all's on. Is Mr. Ash on?
We have a yourself, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Gaylord, and a Mr. Markle that are registered to speak.
Okay, all right. I'm not sure who was intending to speak first. It may have been, well, it can be me, I suppose. So yes, thank you. So I think we gave a good summary of the property. Again, this is a rezoning to allow for a multifamily development. 60 units on the subject property. It lays within the overlay districts intended to be developed in conformance with the district, provide adequate off-street parking and storm sewer infrastructure. Utilities are available for the property, and I think overall, I think good use of the property. So again, the architect's with us. Mr. Gaillard is available to speak any information on that. Also, Mr. Garcia and Mr. Markle can kind of speak make some more specifics about the project as well. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Creek? All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you jumping right in there. And if we do have any questions come up, we'll let you know later. Mr. Garcia.
Hello, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Thank you for your time tonight. We're on and just happy to answer any questions that y'all may have on the proposed development.
Thank you for joining us. Make yourself available. Do we have any questions for Mr. Garcia? All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on here and make yourself available.
Thank you.
Is Mr. Gaylord up next?
Michael Gaylord is not on here that I can see, but Mr. Hold on just a moment. Oh, 816. Maybe. We'll go with Mr. Markle first.
Okay. Mr. Markle, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Won't take up any more time. Just here to answer any questions. So I'll stop there.
Excellent. Well, do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Markle? Thank you, sir. We have one final speaker. There we go. Mr. Gaylord, thank you for joining us. Yeah, is there anything you would like to state before the commission?
Mr. Gaylord is muted. I've asked to unmute, but he might be having issues if he's calling in on his phone.
Okay. Just to be clear, Mr. Gaylord is the architect for the applicant.
That's correct.
All right. I think we can safely assume he's here to be a resource and speak in favor of the project. Were there any questions for Mr. Gaylord if we were able to connect with him? Okay. Well, if city staff is comfortable with it, we will move on from there. Do we have any questions for city staff before we close the public hearing? Okay. We'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation from city staff on this item. Do we have any motions to present?
Move for approval based on staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Cole. Is there any discussion on the item? Motion. All right. Hearing none, if you'd like to vote in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Motion is passed unanimously. Thank you all. So, Mr. Peter, in case Z-21-25, what is the recommendation of city staff?
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing on request from Justin and Stephanie Ingram at property located at 2215 and 2217 Washington Avenue to rezone from C2 to O3. We mailed out 19 notices on this one and had 0 return. Planning Services recommends approval of the zone change request based on the following findings. The proposed zoning is keeping with the land use component of the comprehensive plan and Imagine Waco, a plan for greater downtown. The public infrastructure is adequate to provide for uses allowed in O3 zoning district. That the property meets all the area and width requirements for O3 zoning. There is O3 zoning near the subject property. And the O3 zoning brings the existing residential uses into conformance with the zoning ordinance.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. We do have one public speaker scheduled. Ms. Ingram, welcome. Welcome. If you could state your name and your address, and then address your comments to the commission.
Sure. This is Stephanie Ingram, 2217 Washington Avenue and 2215 Washington Avenue. And I don't have any questions, just appreciate your time tonight.
Do any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Ingram? Thank you for joining us and making yourself available.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for city staff? I will close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on the item?
A motion to approve based on city staff recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Cole and a second by Mr. Chase. Is there any additional discussion on the item? All right. If you'd like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. It passes unanimously. Mr. Peters, in the case of Z-21-26, what's the recommendation of city staff?
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing on request from Carl E. Swanson III, property located at 710 East Park Street, to rezone from R1B to O3. We mailed out 26 notices on this one, 25 notices, I'm sorry, had one returned with concerns, and then also had an email received in opposition. Planning Services recommends approval of the request to change the zoning based on the following findings. One, the proposed zoning is keeping with the land use component of the comprehensive plan and the Imagine Waco plan for greater downtown. Two, the public infrastructure is adequate to provide for uses allowed in O3 zoning. Three, the property meets all the area and width requirements for O3 zoning. Four, the proposed O3 zoning is compatible with the surrounding area. And five, the property is located along a major arterial street, which is Waco Drive.
Thank you. We'll now open our public hearing. We have 0 public speakers registered. Do we have any additional questions for city staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval. Do we have any motions on this item?
Move for approval based on staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion for approval by Mr. Smith and a second by Ms. Briscoe. Is there any additional discussion? If you would like to vote in favor of this item or in this motion, please raise your hand. If you'd like to vote in opposition to this item, please raise your hand. Mr. Cole, just to verify, in favor?
Vote for approval.
Okay, excellent. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Peters, in the case of Z-21-27, what's the recommendation of staff?
Yeah, so this one is being postponed till next month to do the proper posting. So there's no action needed on this one, so we can skip it.
That's right. My apologies. Then we will move on to our abandonment section. Abandonment 21-2.
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing on request from Laura Painter for the abandonment of right-of-way at the northeast corner of Cobb's Drive and Woodcrest Drive, described as a 0.115 acres of land in the city of Waco, to the J. Sampier Survey, abstract number 785, McLennan County, Texas, being a portion of Woodcrest Drive bounded by southeast line of Cobb's Drive, the southwest line of Lot 1, Block 1 of the Residency of Ridgewood Addition to the city of Waco, McLennan County, Texas, recorded under McLennan County Clerk's File 2020-033-864, the official public record of McLennan County, Texas, in the northeast line of that called 0.013 acre tract of, as shown in the Southern Terrace Addition to the city of Waco, McLennan County, Texas, recorded in volume 1244. Page 466 of the deed records in McLennan County, Texas. We did mail out 12 notices on this one and have had one returned with no comments. Staff does recommend approval of the abandonment based on the following findings and condition. That public use of the right-of-way is not required for proper flow of traffic or for emergency vehicle access to the area. And that utility access for surrounding property is not adversely impacted by the abandonment of the right-of-way. We do have one condition that a 20-foot easement must be retained for the area of the abandoned right-of-way. This easement shall be centered over the existing water line.
Thank you. We will now open our public hearing in the case of ABD-21-2. We have 0 public speakers scheduled. Do we have any additional questions for city staff? We'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm so sorry. I've been trying to figure out my mic issue and I just got it. Okay. Motion to approve based on staff findings and recommendations.
Second.
Awesome. We have a motion to approve by Ms. Jefferson and a second by Mr. Smith. Do we have any discussion? If you'd like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. All right, passes unanimously. Mr. Peters, in the case of ABD-21-3, what is the recommendation of staff?
Yes, sir. This is a request from Walker Partners LLC on behalf of Baylor University for the abandonment of right-of-way at Dutton Avenue between South 4th Street and University Parks Drive, described as 3.574 acre Dutton Avenue right-of-way abandonment tract located in the Thomas J. Chambers grant, abstract number 7 in the city of Waco, McLennan County, Texas, and being all of the existing Dutton Avenue right-of-way, which is variable width, located between South 4th Street and University Parks Drive. We did mail out 12 notices and had 0 return. Staff does recommend approval of the abandonment based on the following findings and conditions. That public use of the right-of-way is not required for proper flow of traffic or for emergency vehicle access to the area. Utility access for surrounding property is not adversely impacted by the abandonment of this right-of-way. And the abandonment of the public right-of-way allows Baylor University to provide better connectivity to future expansion projects on the north side of Dutton Avenue to the existing campus. We do have 2 conditions. One, all existing water, wastewater, gas line easements be retained by appropriate utility purveyors for the area of the abandoned right-of-way. And 2, based on our discussion of the work session, we'd like to add a second condition that vehicular access be retained between University Parks and South 4th Street.
Thank you. We will now open our public hearing on this item. We have no public speakers registered. Do we have any additional questions for city staff by the commission? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. We have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
Move for approval with conditions based on staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Ms. Jefferson. Do we have any discussion? If you would like to vote in favor of this item, please raise your hand. All right, passes unanimously. All right, and our final agenda item, Mr. Peters, what is the staff's recommendations in the case of annexation Annex-21-1?
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing on a request from KFMM LLC for voluntary annexation of a territory designating the comprehensive plan land use designation for said territory as office industrial flex, designating C2 community commercial district zoning for said territory, and extending the boundary limits of said city to include the territory located at the intersection of Bagby Avenue and Texas Central Drive, and further located within Texas, Waco's extraterritorial jurisdiction described as a 3.0006 acre tract of land situated in the Carlos Ocampo survey, abstract number 32, city of Waco, McLennan County, Texas, being all of the called 2.50 acre tract of land, tract 1, and all of a called 0.5 acre tract of land, tract 2, both described in a warranty deed with a vendor's lien to KFMM LLC, recorded in document number 2010-03-4877, official public records, McLennan County, Texas. Staff does recommend approval of the annexation, the comprehensive plan land use designation, and the zoning, C2 zoning.
Excellent. We will now open our public hearing. We have one public speaker scheduled. Mr. Slimp, welcome back. Please address any items to the commission you'd like to say.
I was just going to say it's kind of a little bit of a Bastogne piece of property. It's completely surrounded by the city of Waco, so it's just kind of a matter of time. But if you have any questions, I'm available.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Slimp? All right, thank you for joining us, sir. Do we have any additional questions for city staff? All right, hearing none, we will close the public hearing. We do have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this item?
Motion for approval based on staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion for approval by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Cole. Is there any additional discussion? All right. If you would like to vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. All right, it passes unanimously. That concludes our business on the agenda. Mr. Peters, did y'all want to make a statement as to prior agenda items and city council meeting dates?
Yeah, so the agenda items that were originally on the February 23rd meeting that we postponed to this meeting, they will go to city council on April 6th. And then the remaining agenda items will go to the April 20th city council meeting.
Excellent, thank you. All right, thank you all for participation tonight. Appreciate your work, and y'all have a great evening. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Ross.
Have a good